and they were drawing with colored pencils their journey from Sudan. So they were drawing the soldiers on horseback. They were drawing the soldiers who came and attacked their village from the back of pickup trucks.
Right.
And then we would look at those pictures and they would proudly show us how they were in a way expressing their journey
Right.
through art. And we would then toggle with them between the artistic expression through colored pencils at one table and 3 feet away, standing, singing some songs from their country or other countries, and some body music. So they got to have choices in how they expressed the point of life that moment was for them, that moment where we entered it. We, our team.
Welcome. Listen to this next Agile Vocalist podcast.
Betsy Blakeslee sits at the helm of 3 projects: World Harmony Chorus in Oakland, California, Expressive Arts Refuge, and Verb Q. Her choruses have performed at the State of the World Forum, UN Millennial Summit in New York, the Freight and Salvage in Berkeley, California, and at benefit concerts throughout the San Francisco Bay Area. Her work with refugees spans 2 decades. She directed expressive arts programs for refugee youth in Bosnia and Croatia during the wars of the 1990s. Since 2016, her Expressive Arts Refuge team and Moira Smiley have been running similar programs at refugee camps in France, Greece, and Lebanon. Betsy Blakeslee is the co-author on a forthcoming book about the Calais jungle refugee camp.
So, welcome, Betsy. Thank
Hi,
you for
Rachel.
being here. I'd love it if you would start talking about how you got your roots. How did you get your roots in conducting and singing, and when in your life did you know that music would be your chosen career?
I was a clueless child. I had no idea who I was, what my strengths were. I only knew later when I looked back and I saw what other people recognized in me. So when you asked this question, I think when I was 8, I was on television on a program called Fun to Learn Music. It was a children's music program for a year. And I was only one of 4 children who were selected to be on it. But I just thought every kid went to the TV station after school. That's how clueless I was. We didn't have a TV, so I never saw myself on TV. And it wasn't a time when the visual and the desire for celebrity was really so prominent in the minds of the kids. So I would have to say that somebody recognized musicality, and probably my piano teacher at that point. But also music was part of the schools then. And so we were able to do that. And my grammar school had an upright piano. And I would always sit down when I'd get to school early, and kids would come play with me, and I'd make up duets, or we would have certain duets we'd play together. And then in junior high, by then I had taken up the clarinet, and I became first-year clarinet, which makes you concert mistress in a band, right? Not an orchestra, that would be violin. So I got to conduct when I was in 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade. And my mom made me a blue dress with ribbons down the back because the audience would be seeing me from the back. I wasn't at all visual, really. I was just an audio kid. So I was totally interested in how that long score, how do you find all the parts for all the instruments on the score? Because there's a lot of parts for a band. You have to read them all at once. Or let your eyes toggle between them. So that was so fun for me to be able to feel music in my body as a kid. And conducting was the first way I got to do that, besides playing instruments and singing.
And so was your piano teacher, but your parents, I would assume, had something to say in getting you to the piano teacher? Or
yes, and probably my grandmother, who was a music major at Vassar. And she had a piano, but both of my parents weren't terribly musical. We didn't do music as a family.
Can you talk a little bit about the refugee experience I'm always fascinated, and I think a lot of people are on a very basic level. When you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, how does music fit in when you're a refugee? What's that experience like where it adds value and you know it's adding value?
It's such a great question. As a psychology student, I thought that pyramid was rigid, that you really had to answer all those basic needs, food, safety, shelter first, before you could go on up the pyramid to the more fun parts of life, right? Like self-expression.
Right.
No. What we experienced in various refugee camps where we ran music projects was that people who had a lot of insecurity, but just enough in place, just enough food, maybe they lived in a tent with 2 other people, a little pup tent, clothes would be handed out from a distribution center. They didn't always get what they wanted, but nobody was barefoot.
Nobody was, yeah. Okay.
All right, everybody pretty much had a blanket, but sometimes you needed 2 blankets. You didn't always have a second one. Sometimes things would get stolen, and it would be a day or 2 before you would get them. So your needs were somewhat uncertain, but you were surrounded by community. That population who had a little bit of infrastructure, a little bit of safety around them in Calais jungle, France, was to some extent open to expressive arts. Not everybody came to what we offered. Very few adults came, more underage kids, meaning usually teenagers. Came, they were without their families.
Right.
So here were these warm, lovely grown-ups, and we had Tawfiq Halabi and his sister Tammy and their brother Tarek, who were Arabic speakers, Tawfiq particularly on the team. And, they were singing in warm, and they always welcomed them. So, yeah, that's where they wanted to be, rather than just waiting in their tent for nothing to happen.
وحياة الشجر وأغلى الذكريات ما تردد كلام يحيي الفاتمات وما تخلي العيون تحكي.
Tell us about what expressive arts is.
I think of it as a way that someone can joggle, play with, puzzle out their experience through artistic expression. So if they're singing something about their emotional state or their journey and that part of their journey in life. If they're doing something with art, visual art, they're maybe shaping something with clay that's expressing something from the inside. So they're getting to, in a way, shape their experience or reshape it through an expressiveness. So it, meaning expressive arts, is adding a component to experience that is active and is a shaping, so that whatever happens to a person doesn't have to stay in a rigid state, but they can rework it. And experience becomes more pliable through the arts. People and who they become becomes more pliable. It becomes something like clay in their hands.
Wow. My brain gets set running wild with that answer. I love it.
Yeah. And I've had the experience many times personally and professionally of watching an experience get transmitted through music, or see music really transform an experience, or artistically. For example, I started a little nonprofit called Expressive Arts Refuge.
Yeah.
I gathered a team of educators, musicians, and Arabic speakers, and we went off to refugee camps and ran music programs. And one of the first ones we did was in Calais jungle in France, and there was a group of Sudanese boys who were sitting in a hut, like just, 4 walls of plywood, not much, a few plastic chairs, and they were drawing with colored pencils their journey from Sudan. So they were drawing the soldiers on horseback. They were drawing the soldiers who came and attacked their village from the back of pickup trucks.
Right.
And then we would look at those pictures and they would proudly show us how they were, in a way, expressing their journey
Right.
through art. And we would then toggle with them between the artistic expression through colored pencils at one table and 3 feet away, standing, singing some songs from their country or other countries, and some body music. So they got to have choices in how they expressed the point of life that moment was for them. That moment where we entered it. We, our team,
Right.
and they, who had become refugees fairly recently and were in Europe for the first time, trying to figure out, how do white people behave?
Right.
What happens in this culture?
Right.
How does this language sound? So we were like some of their first experience with Westerners. So we wanted to allow plenty of space for them to express themselves.
And the jungle is not, for the listeners here, the jungle is not an actual jungle. Could you just give a little summary of it so that we could...
Anyone who was at the refugee camp in northern France called Calais jungle, called it Calais jungle or the jungle, but that's actually taken from an Afghan word in Pashto meaning the woods. It's actually a jungle. Is that they spelled it D-J-A-N-G, something like that. And the Western volunteers who were there heard it as jungle, and it stuck.
Oh my gosh.
And people use that term with varying feeling tones, right? The local Calaisians said it with disdain and scoffing, and the volunteers said it with nostalgia because they had some of their most wonderful experiences there.
And what was I forget what year it was, what was the theater company that did the show about Calais? Here in the
There were
area?
actually
Was it
two different theater projects.
Okay.
The one that most of the listeners here probably know about is one by 2 theater people from England, who we call Joe and Joe, who erected a big geodesic dome in the jungle and passed a mic around and let people express themselves. And they did some theater workshops and expressing their journey, and people shared. So there was this kind of homegrown theater project in the jungle, out of which grew the show that traveled around the world. That was the theater. There was a second theater project, which I was involved with, that was run by Secours Catholique, also known as Caritas.
Okay.
They ran a theater workshop that was separate
Okay.
for refugees from a wide variety of countries who were living in Calais jungle. And they ran this workshop out of their day center in the town of Calais, which is quite close to the Calais jungle, which was on the outskirts of Calais.
Got it.
And the refugee actors in this workshop one day surprised them by asking them, the directors, and a few of the Caritas staff who were around, to please take seats and chairs. And then they performed a piece that they had secretly made up about their journey from their countries across the Mediterranean, including people falling overboard and drowning, and making it through detention centers and being beat up, and making it to France. It was so touching. And they brought me in to help shape the musical component of that theater piece, which was called To Be or Not. And that theater piece traveled throughout, it had a tour throughout France, and it was very well received, had a very positive review.
To simulate the refugee experience, I had Betsy teach me a Cuban song originally written in Spanish by Raul Cabrero Hernandez. In camps where refugees are trying to get to England, it's taught in English, along with body percussion, choreographed foot stamps, claps, body slaps, and finger snaps as you sing.
2, 3, and go. Right, left, right, left. And on that 4th beat, we haven't put anything yet, but what we can do is a snap, or a double snap. One on the right hand, one on the left, right? Yeah. Yeah, so here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, right, left. Right, left, right, left. Snap. Right, left, right, left, right, left. Snap. Yes, yes. Yeah. Right, left, left. Yeah. Right, left, right, left, right, left. Snap. Yeah. Oh, mama, oh, my friends, sit a while and sing a while until we blend. Oh, mama, oh, my friends, sit a while and sing a while until we blend. Oh, mama, good. Oh, my friends, sit a while and sing a while until we blend. Mama, oh, you, my friend, sit a while and sing a while until we blend. Oh, mama, oh, my friend, sit a while and sing a while until we blend. Oh, mama, oh, my friend, sit a while and sing a while until we. Nice. That was great. That was great. You picked that up fast? Yeah.
You've had what I think you would call or categorize a blessing of being able to do this work in multiple places around the world with different kinds of populations, adults, children. Can you tell us a before and after story that you've experienced?
Sure. There was one boy, we'll call him Mohammed,
Okay.
from Sudan. He was one of the boys who proudly showed us his picture of the Janjaweed soldiers arriving with rifles. And he was without family, and France had made a very long journey from Sudan through northern Africa, across a boat, through all those southern European countries, and made it all the way to the north of France, right to the border of the English Channel. So it's a very long journey for a 17-year-old.
Yes.
Probably 16 when he started, 17 when we met him. And he had what I would say was a typical kind of neurological jangling that comes from trauma. So you could see in him and in many of the refugees a kind of slightly asymmetrical, slightly less coordinated way of his body moving and reacting. It was tiny. We're not talking Tourette's, but we're just like, I would teach a little simple body music rhythm, and just to get the feet going, left, right, left, right. It was very hard for him to do that. So, but we taught him songs over the course of the summer. We bonded. We had a lot of sweet times together. We did some performances, including the kids, gave them the stage. They were so proud of themselves. Our stage was a modified horse trailer. They sang at the top of the ramp. We had a single microphone and, a Bluetooth setup with a phone and so on. Anyway, he loved certain songs, never really mastered them, but he had fun singing them. You could see his pure joy when he performed. And then he tried again and again to sneak onto a truck and stow away to get across the English Channel to get to England, which is where he wanted to be and where he would be able eventually to start school and so on. He finally made it after many months of trying and disappointments and difficulties. One day, I was on a video call with him. He'd made it to England, and he was in a little apartment. He had a sponsor. It was just around Halloween. There was a jack-o'-lantern on the kitchen table. So I felt like he was finally in good hands.
How old was he?
17
17 still. Okay, all right.
By this time, Calais jungle had been demolished, so he had gotten out just in time.
Yeah.
Otherwise, he would have been a kid on the street. And he was now in England. You could see he was sad. He felt displaced. His face was a little long. And he started in our video call with his limited English singing one of the songs that we had sung together. And I was singing it with him. And then his hand just touched the screen, and my hand also touched the screen. So it's like he was allowing us to connect through this MO of singing together through the screens many thousands of miles apart. And then he asked me to send him a clip of Moira Smiley, who is part of our team, who had taught him Bring Me Little Water, Silvy. And I sent him that, and he was singing along with it. And I pulled up Nina Simone's version of I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free, which he loved. And we were singing along with it and chair dancing in front of the screens. So there was some sense of continuity, how the way we had connected through music with very little common language allowed us to continue the connection. And we're still in touch today.
And if he's 17, is he allowed to work, or how does he
So by now he's
participate?
21.
Oh, now he's 21.
Yeah,
Okay.
he had a little school. He's now working in construction, so he's able to bring in some income. He's developing a little bit of community. He was on a sports team.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm not saying it's an easy life,
No.
but it was softened a little by many kind people along the way, including our team.
You know, you've worked with both children and adults as refugees in camps and settings. Do you see a difference in how the children engage with you and what you're doing versus the adults, and how they connect with what you're there to offer?
Yes. I saw a huge difference in children who had been in school before and children, for example, Syrian children who had never been in school because war has been in their country their entire childhood. So children from Syria who were 7 had never been in school, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Wow.
So their relationship to teachers wasn't something that was familiar. So they didn't know how to behave in a class. So we had to be careful, and we had to use people from their culture to help us to manage the classroom so that we could establish or co-create a learning environment.
Gotcha.
Once we could establish this was a learning environment where you get to play together, but in a particular way, it's got a little structure to it,
right.
with little segments of, we're going to do this for like a few minutes, and then you can do some blowout time and throw your arms around, but you can't just throw your arms around and knock into the person next to you the entire time.
Right.
Then it would work. The kids who had been in school before were so thrilled to have any kind of a class-like structure that they loved it. They, like many kids, did not have an easy time organizing themselves to show up every day. I do think there's a collision of cultures that can happen when you're doing the kind of work we were doing in a refugee camp, where Westerners are trying to lead a class for people who have more Eastern tendencies, and many of them were really very similar to Westerners in a lot of way, and some were not, and people also had lives which were very, very chaotic. So it was very difficult and not super important for them to have regularity in certain areas that were not connected with moving their lives forward.
Right. So this is a fun question that I ask most of my guests, almost all my guests. Where do you get your creative inspirations? You put together a lot of music and direct a non-audition chorus for anyone who wants to come and sing, and you sing music from all over the world, and you teach people not just how to say the words, but how to sing the notes. And where do you get inspired? What do you do to tap into that creative source to find what to work on?
I love learning from people who know more than I do, and it's not hard to find them. So as a writer, I read people who win awards in the genre in which I write, because I learn best from reading what other people have written at a very high level. Musically, I like listening to people who sing at a really high level, or whose musicianship is at a high level, and will expand my notion of how a particular song or phrase or phrasing or ornamentation can be done in different genres. I love genre bending. For me, that's a really exciting place that inspires me. So when I hear people who've straddled more than one culture and are singing a song that reflects that, to me, that's the most exciting thing. I feel like this is 2021. This is someone from the Middle East who's been living in Spain, and you can hear a little flamenco influence in this Arabic song they're singing. Or this is someone from the West who's traveled a lot in Africa, and you can hear how their phrasing is becoming more African, or they have mastered the clicks that so few of us Westerners who try can actually do.
The mouth
clicks that are part of the alphabet.
And which part of, I forget, because it was a number of years since I sang with you, what country, there are many songs I'm sure you've taught with the mouth clicks that are part of the alphabet. What are some of the countries that use that as their
I forget
language?
and don't want to say it incorrectly.
Okay.
So let me just say that it's many African languages
have that,
use clicks. Yeah. We use syllables and have a lot of letters in our alphabet.
Yes.
But they use clicks. Other languages use melody, right? The same 3 letters, the same 3-letter combination can mean 4 or 5, 6, 7 different things, depending on what kind of melody you attach to it. When we don't have those kinds of melodic tones in our language. So where I get inspiration is from watching people who do things creatively or who do things at a higher level than I do. And I love watching people
Listening.
and
Right?
listening,
Yes. Yeah.
right? Listening and watching, mostly listening. Sometimes I close my eyes and listen really hard, to listen really carefully, so I can hear something that's being done in a way that I wouldn't have thought of. And I know that music can be really expressive and can take us on an emotional journey if we can learn to listen deeply to it.
Right.
So, for example, there was a really excellent Sudanese singer in Calais jungle refugee camp. I learned a lot from listening to him sing. It was partly the emotion that he brought, but also the Sudanese style of ornamentation, the quavering on the notes, was so different from what we sing when we do ornaments in the West, that I learned a great deal just from listening, and I felt really inspired, like I could listen to him all evening.
Yeah.
واغرى الذكريات وما تردد كلام يحيي الفاتمات وحياة الشجر واغرى الذكريات ما تردد كلام يحيي الفاتمات وما تخلي العيون تحكي ذكريات مدخل العيون تحكي عالذكريات وما تردد كلام يمكن هان عليك ليه يا قلبي ليه تاني رجعت ليه زي أيام زمان وعدت تحن ليه وليه ليه يا قلبي ليه مسكين الزمن مسكين مسكين الزمن مسكين مسكين الزمن مسكين مسكين الزمن مسكين ما بيقدر يفرق بينما وليه يا قلبي ليه تاني رجعت ليه زي أيام زمان عدت تحن ليه وليه ليه يا قلبي ليه.
So another question is, once you get into the camps and the work you start to do that's musical and percussive with the refugees, what is it that you actually do with them and take them through, and how do you engage them?
The first thing we do is walk around, talk to people, listen, find out what they need and want, find out who the musicians are, try to provide platforms for the refugee musicians so that they can perform, which they've usually not been able to do since they left home. Sometimes there are some excellent musicians who are in refugee camps, and their the world is not hearing their talent. So we put on concerts to help provide platforms. One of the things we do is we work with a concept called entraining, E-N-T-R-A-I-N. So entraining means that you, as an individual, attune yourself to the other people who are in close proximity to you, so that there's a group attunement that happens and a feeling of belonging and safety. And when entraining is happening in a group at a high level, the body produces oxytocin, which is the love hormone. So what happens when people sing together in harmony or in call and response, where they have to listen closely to the person who's doing the call, because then they have to come in with their response at the right time with the other people in the room. In a refugee camp, it's a tent. You get a level of listening and coordination and sync that doesn't normally happen when we are driving around in our own car in the United States or in our own house. It happens much more easily when there's rhythm and music going on in that group. So if you've ever wondered, why do you feel a cohesiveness at a concert particularly a concert where you're asked to sing the refrain, or everybody starts to sing the refrain of a song.
Of course.
There's the oxytocin. Everybody knows the
Yeah.
same song. They come
Sure.
in together on the refrain,
Sure.
or they're taught a little part and they sing it. Rallies, protests can be really fun, particularly when the music starts. Why? Because people are in training. They've come together, in that case, for a purpose that brings them together, gives them a sense of belonging. Then if you add music, you add that open-heartedness,
Right.
and then there's the oxytocin that bonds people,
Right.
and you go away having had a really sublime
Amazing
experience.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at rallies where there's violence,
Yeah.
the violence, the breaking of windows usually is not happening when people are singing
That's true.
together.
That's true.
Or one person creating violence can break up that feeling of safety and belonging. So entraining is a big part of it. Oxytocin is a big part of it. The musical styles I try to bring in are close enough to the styles where people come from that they can relate to them.
Okay.
But also, depending on what country they're in, they're trying to learn the language of that country, or if they're headed. In the case of the people in France for England,
Yeah.
we felt comfortable teaching in English because most of them wanted to learn English, because most were headed to England. And I try to learn a lot and to incorporate the local musicians whose lives and community we've walked into, is we want to walk in with respect
Of course.
and humility.
yes.
It takes a lot of cultural humility. So body music, rhythm, is another part of entraining. When people are doing something rhythmic together, that helps the feeling of the group entrainment. So when people are learning to do some clapping, stepping, slapping of the body in a particular musical pattern, that brings together a feeling of unison or unity or collectivity that can be very healing. And you can almost watch, which I like to do, for the kind of neurological retraining or aligning that starts to happen when people begin to work with a symmetrical pattern of, left, right, left, right, left, right,
Yeah.
left, right.
Yeah.
And after people have experienced trauma, you really want to work with the beauty of musicality in trying to reshape it. And rhythm, body music, is such a good way to do that because, first of all, it's fun and pleasurable because we get the oxytocin of doing it in a group, or even 2 people or 3 people doing it together. And the nervous system starts to realign and balance so that things that were jangly can begin to become a little smoother. Sometimes when we were working with refugees, we would see a tick under the eye, and it would go away after they were doing body music for a while.
When you mean a while, do you mean minutes, or are you talking about successive days?
Successive days
Okay.
of a class every day or most days over a period of 2 or 3 weeks where the whole neurology was beginning to shift.
That was inspiring. Be sure to listen again soon. Agile Vocalist is created and produced by Rachel Medanek. Contributing editor Ben Kruger. Logo and identity design by Sasha Brandt, with special thanks to Dave Watt.